What is going on, guys? Another day here at the shop. So you've seen me working on the Prado a little bit. Well, one thing led to another and we decided to do a little more work to it today. So I have been pulling apart the engine bay. We are going to do a couple mods. We pulled the intercooler off and we're working on getting the throttle body off and then the EGR setup, which is back here. I have an EGR block off plate. I need the EGR block off to run the probe. That's where the probe mounts. So we need to rip the EGR out, block it off, and get the probe all mounted up. So yeah, let's tear this mo down. And check that out. It fits perfect now. I think that's gonna look awesome in there. And you need one of these. You need an EGT for safety. Especially on a diesel, you want to keep an eye on the exhaust gas temp. So that fits in there perfectly. It's got the little strap in the back holding it in, and there should be plenty of room where this came out of too. I measured it in there, but all I ended up doing was taking a Dremel with this sander, and I just went around a couple times to open it up, and then a 60mm gauge fits right in there. No problemo. All right, so got this thing tearing down. So we got our EGR pipe. It goes from the exhaust manifold across to right there is the EGR. We have 3 out of the 4 bolts out right now. It's pretty tight back there, but we are almost home free. So some pros and cons. Well, it's mostly just pros. Taking the EGR off. The EGR on these things, it just dumps dirty diesel exhaust back into the intake manifold. It's an emissions thing. So taking it off, there's really no cons. It actually runs better and it runs cooler. It keeps your EGTs down a bit. I almost wish I had the EGT gauge set up before and after, but there's not really a way to do that unless you drill your exhaust manifold. But because the EGR runs off the exhaust manifold, the block off plate that I bought for it has this little tapped hole in it. So the port, this is going to use the probe right in there. I bought an adapter so the probe will fit right in this block off plate. So it ends up being perfect. It's right on the exhaust manifold. That way I can get a accurate reading of the actual EGTs. And it's a perfect spot for it. That way I don't got to drill the manifold. I don't got to do none of that bullshit. Just bolt the block off plate on and run the probe to it. Pretty simple. So yeah, we are almost there. All right, after a while of fighting with it and wiggling it around, the EGR is finally off. And I'm actually quite surprised how clean it is inside of it. There's really not a whole lot of buildup, considering this thing does run very well. I mean, you got a little bit of soot on this side, but you know, people post up on the groups that I'm in, and these things are caked. You know, sometimes they're all so caked up that nothing even moves in there. And this one is relatively clean. You know, I got about 150,000 miles on this truck, and it was maintained heavily. So I have a folder of all the maintenance. Every 5,000 miles, this thing went in and got whatever it needed whenever it needed. And I guess that paid off because this thing is running super well. Now, another thing people usually do when they remove the EGR is they take the throttle body off and they take the butterfly out. Diesels aren't like a gas engine, so you don't need even a throttle body on a diesel. Some people eliminate the throttle body altogether, but I'm trying to keep it so it doesn't get any check engine lights or anything. So what you have to do is you leave all the sensors and everything on, and you just take the butterfly out of the throttle body. There's actually 2. There's a big one and a small one. And people say they get a little more power, low-end power especially, from taking the butterflies out. At this point, I'm not sure if I'm going to take the main one out, but I am going to take the EGR one out because there's no point, there's no EGR anymore. So we'll take that one out and just hollow it out and put the plate on it, and do a little more research on the bigger throttle body. I mean, everyone says to do it, but they said it does make a little rougher shutdown because the throttle body closes when you turn the truck off, and it slows the air down, so it makes it the shut off a little bit smoother. So at the trade-off, getting a little more power. So we'll see what happens. All right, so the engine is mostly back together. We got our EGR delete. There is the EGR that came off of it. We have our HKS probe and gauge setup running into the cabin. I now have to wire up the EGT gauge. I got to put the air box back on too, but I started it, made sure it still runs like a cherry still, and now it doesn't have dirty exhaust fumes going into the motor and feeding it. So it should run a bit better, nice and cool.
I'm calling DOT. You're deleting it.
Yeah, they're gonna find me.
They're gonna.
They're just gonna tell me I'm fine.
This one don't got the DEF, right?
Def not.
Def not.
Nope.
Sounds sick. Did you start it? Did you show them? Let him hear it. Whenever you're ready. Sounds pretty dope. Big fan of that.
All right, so after working all day long, we finally got some stuff done. So EGR removal complete, runs good, no leaks or anything. So step one done. And then it took me a while to figure everything out for the wiring on this HKS gauge, because the wires that you would think what color is which is not. So I wired it up thinking yellow would be like, say, ignition power. Nope. And red would be constant. Nope. The only thing that was common on there was black was ground. Orange, which is usually illumination, was actually your constant 12 volts. And then red was your switched ignition, and yellow was your illumination. So I rewired it and got everything, working good. And here's the result. I mounted it right there where the clock was. Awesome spot in the Prado. Get it lit up. And there she goes. So we have not tested it for temperature wise yet, but hopefully it works fine.